Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I wanted to talk to you guys about how to pick out a Linux distribution for yourself. So currently I'm over at distrowatch.com, which is a great starting place for finding the distribution you want to use. And you can see over here the page hit ranking, something I've talked about a few times before. You can see basically the outgoing traffic, which are the most popular distributions out there. And that usually comes down to some variation of Mint. And Mint's been number one for a long time, but Ubuntu's also been up there, which Mint is actually based on. Though Mint does have a version which is Debian based as well. And then you have the original Debian, the original Ubuntu, and Manjaro, which are based off of Arch Linux. And what do all of these really high top of the list distributions have in mind? That's generally that they're quite stable, that they're easy to set up, they have access to plenty of packages, and that they have basically all the GUI user interface tools that you need to kind of run Linux like you would run a Windows operating system. So they're very easy to use in that sense. So what I would do from here, assuming you're just looking for a regular Linux distro, is to go into each of these pages. And you can basically see screenshots of how each of them look. Now, you'll notice there's like a Cinnamon edition and a Mate edition for Linux Mint. There's also an XFCE and I think a KDE. Now, what those different editions are talking about is basically the different interfaces that you can have installed out of the box for them. What are they actually called? Desktop environments? Yeah, I believe it's called a desktop environment officially. So you can see here on my Linux Mint desktop that we've got a certain set of icons. The menu opens up and it's just got a certain look. This is Cinnamon, by the way. And then we have icons in the bottom right. It looks a lot like Windows, and that's kind of what the Cinnamon desktop environment was set up to look like. And then there are other ones that are kind of more out there, like Open Box, where you might drop all of these bars and operate more on right-click menus rather than the standard kind of Windows start menu style. So really, when you're looking at Linux distributions, you're not just looking at which flavor of Linux you're using, but you're also thinking about which desktop you're going to be running. You can see Ubuntu, the core Ubuntu package at least, uses the Unity interface by default, but you can also grab Ubuntu GNOME in other desktop environments as well. And there is a lot of crossover between these desktop environments. Like XFCE, you can pretty much have out of the box on a lot of different Linux distributions, and I don't see why you couldn't add it on as an extra to pretty much any Linux distribution, because those are things you can just install out of the different application repositories that these tools have. And then Manjaro, one of my personal favorites, looks quite nice, usually has these kind of green teal icon sets, and I think it just looks pretty smooth. That's the KDE edition right there by the looks of it. But they do have other versions that'll give you slightly different looking user interfaces. Now, there are other things to consider about selecting a Linux distribution. For 90% of people, maybe 99% of people, just kind of going off of the interface you like and making sure that it's a distribution that has a lot of basically apps available in the store, nice graphical interfaces to make it easier on typical users, and those sort of things. But you can also consider distributions that have very specialized software packages. So over here at number 20 on DistroWatch, we have the Kali package, which is formerly known as Backtrack. You can see it says it's a collection of security and forensic tools, or it comes with those tools. And I don't have a lot of personal experience in this, but from what I've heard, people like to use Kali Linux and distributions like that when they're doing things like penetration testing. So it's going to have all these applications installed, which most users don't even need to worry about. And that's one of the cool things about Linux. You can kind of get exactly what you're looking for. You can also see release model rolling. That's another thing to consider. Manjaro is a rolling release model, and I believe Ubuntu is not. And what that means, yeah, you can see fixed here. What that means is that Manjaro would never need to reinstall the operating system because it updates from the core software architecture to the new core as it's released. So it's basically always updating to the newest files, whereas with operating systems like Ubuntu, if you want to update to the new version, you kind of have to reinstall Ubuntu. Now, I'm not actually sure if you're able to just upgrade. I'd say there's a good chance, but I can't confirm that. But you would have to burn a new ISO to either a USB drive or a CD-ROM drive in order to get that going. You can see here that it's possible to just buy a disk, but that's actually not necessary. You can make your own for free, well, plus the cost of a USB drive or a DVD. So let's see, is there really much else to mention? If you're curious, Manjaro is based on Arch. And one of the reasons I wouldn't recommend Arch is because Arch at its core is actually a pain in the butt to install. Let's go ahead and go, well, relative to just using a graphical user interface. So let's see, the wiki, the installation guide for Arch Linux, and it's this page, which it's not too bad, really. Really, you're just putting in a bunch of terminal commands, but I mean, actually following along with this might be more difficult for the average user, so probably not a great distribution for beginners to have to go through all of this stuff. Though people have written some scripts to make that a little bit easier. I think it's called like AIS, Arch Installer Script or something like that. Tried that once, it was pretty good. Right, okay, so in conclusion, look through the different distributions. A lot of the differences just have to do with visual components. Like Ubuntu, Linux, Mint, they're using the same back-end package manager, which is apt-get and the Synaptic package manager. In Manjaro Linux and Arch Linux, they're using Pacman, which well, more or less does the same thing, except I think the graphical tools for the Ubuntu Synaptic package manager, I can actually show it right here. So I'll just type in install the software manager. And we can show, I think these tools just look a little bit easier to use, a little bit cleaner, and probably the way that most people would want to actually browse for new applications. So it's like, oh, you want a graphic app, okay, maybe you want to install GIMP, GNU Image Manipulation Program, and then you just go in here, you type in your password, you hit install, and you're done, right? That's what users of Windows would expect. Now, I'm pretty sure Manjaro has a package manager, and most of the really high up there top-tier Linux distributions are going to have one. So once again, it comes down to kind of your flavor of choice. But honestly, I think you can't really go wrong if you stick to one of those top 5 on distrowatch.com. It is a worthy point of contention to decide if you want the rolling release so you never have to update, or if you do want to just, if you're okay with the static update where once a year you might need to change a new operating system or to upgrade it. And that's only if you want the absolute latest features too. And do keep in mind the whole idea of the desktop environments, because you have 5 or 6 options for each Linux distribution before you go download it. So do you want Mint Cinnamon? Do you want Mint KDE? Do you want Mint XFCE? Look at the screenshots. They'll tell you how the interface looks, and that'll pretty much determine for you which desktop environment you want. And if you are looking for something very specific like Kali, just read the About pages until you find one that sounds like it has the tools available to you. But in general, for most operating systems here that are Linux-based, they're going to have the same stuff out of the box, like Firefox, LibreOffice. Often GIMP is installed by default. So hopefully that's given you enough information to kind of determine which Linux distributions you consider good. I myself am quite a fan of Ubuntu, Manjaro, and since I'm trying Mint now, I'm also enjoying Linux Mint as well. So I've been Chris. Thanks for watching this video on how to pick out a Linux distribution in 2017, and I will see you guys in my future video content.